Hey guys, welcome in Stinkin Truth Podcast alongside Mike Evans. I am Mark Schlereth, and I'm sporting. Look at this. South Florida baseball.
The Bulls?
The Bulls. That's where my son Daniel is going to coach. He's the pitching coach of South Florida. So I got a lot of South Florida stuff all of a sudden.
Gee, thanks. I'd love to have some too to
I've got
represent.
You know what? I'm going to bring you this T-shirt, and you are going to wear it on not this particular. I've got another one just like it.
Right.
And
I'll wear it on Thursday.
On Thursday.
Okay.
Okay.
You got it.
Record on Thursday.
Deal.
Okay.
In the meantime, Mark Schlereth. Mark Schlereth, you hot snot. Wow. I spent not my entire, but a good part of my 4th of July weekend just reading tweets of you going back and forth with angry Baltimore Raven fans. My goodness, you have stirred up a hornet's nest.
I'm going to preempt that comment. I don't truly think they're angry Baltimore Raven fan. I think they're angry Lamar Jackson fan.
There's a difference?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference. I think the angry Lamar Jackson fan are a lot like the Tebowites that will not listen to anything of reason because they are a cult. I mean, a flat-out cult.
Okay, you just did it again.
No, I'm just telling you.
You just called Lamar Jackson fans members of a cult. I'm sure that won't go viral.
Well, that's like Tebow fans were like Tebowites were cultish as well. They were also a member of a cult.
Okay.
So this is not earth-shattering by any stretch of the imagination. This is crazy people that do not understand and will not be educated and will not actually have a sane conversation about Lamar Jackson. So that's cult level craziness.
Okay, from your vantage point, what is or are the points that they're failing to see?
Well, I mean, just like if you say Lamar because he's got 2 MVPs in the regular season and because he is that gifted an athlete and that good a player, has a lot of pressure on him, doesn't make you a racist. It just makes it true. But what I get from people are, well, why don't you say Josh Allen or Trevor Lawrence has a ton of, well, they do have a ton of pressure. Everybody that plays in the NFL has got a ton of pressure. But you show me when Josh Allen has 2 MVPs and playoff failure after playoff failure, or Trevor Lawrence, or, pick any guy, it doesn't matter. I don't give a rip. The color of his skin matters not. What matters is the guy is the best or one of the best quarterbacks in the league who's had a ton of regular season success, who has won a ton of games, and has not performed well in the playoffs. And the playoffs, I think one of the interesting things about the playoffs, I was texting back and forth with John Harbaugh this weekend because I just wanted to give him a heads up. I just said, hey, listen, I go, John, here's the deal. You may catch some strays when you come back for your opening press conference, and I just want to tell you kind of what was said.
Yeah.
And we have a conversation. He knows, and I know as well as anybody, that playoff success is hard. You're playing against the best teams in the NFL, guys that are probably on a heater going into the playoffs that are playing really well. And it's not just your quarterback. It's not just it's your defense playing well, your offense playing well, your special teams units playing well, your coach is putting a game plan together that you can execute. One of the interesting things about playoff execution is I was a member of a team in 1996, the Denver Broncos, that went 13-3, were the number one seed throughout the playoffs, and got bounced by Jacksonville in a divisional playoff game here in Denver. And a lot of people want to talk about coaching, and Lamar hasn't, they haven't put a great game plan together. Man, I understand that. understand the way that operates. We played Jacksonville, and we had the number one rushing team in football. We had Terrell Davis. He had 1,700 and some odd yards that year. And we put in a game plan that essentially was kind of a check with me game plan, like premium play game plan. And it's one of the reasons I probably hate that term premium play. Because if they got in certain defenses that were very easily exploitable in the passing game, we checked out of our runs based upon what they were giving us. So essentially they could check us out of what we did best to do something quote unquote better. Like that's bullshit. Like that's not adhering to your identity. And the fact that in the AFC Championship game, the number one running team in football, the Baltimore Ravens, gave their running backs 6 carries is absolutely a colossal coaching failure. That's just bad. It's bad football. And it's what happened to us against Jacksonville. I think at the end of the day, Terrell Davis had 13, 14 carries for like 90 some odd yards, averaging 6 yards a carry and only got it. I mean, this is a guy that carried the ball 25, 30 times a game all year long, and we gave him 12 to 14 carries. Unacceptable. It's unacceptable. But here's the deal. You're playing really good teams, and if they basically say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stack the box, give you an unfavorable number count in the box, and force you to throw the football. Well, guess what happens? If that's what they're going to do. Now, one, I'm a believer in I don't care how stacked the box is, I'm going to have a plan to run against it. And you run away, you leave a couple guys unblocked on the backside, you figure out how you're going to boot keep out, hold the, you do that to hold that, and you still run the football and you attack that and you stay true to that. I believe you have to do that. They didn't do that, okay? That's a coaching failure. But when you're put in a situation where we've got one-on-one matchups all over the football field, then you got to win those matchups, right? Not only the receivers have to win those matchups, but your quarterback has to be able to throw the guys open and do all those things. So there's certainly, it mitigates a bad performance of only putting up 10 points, but it still is the history of the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson in the playoffs have not been good enough.
There's a lot to unpack from what you said already about Lamar. I kind of want to go at it piece by piece here. The racial element in all of this. Hey, there are plenty of white quarterbacks out there who have had to deal with a lot of playoff scrutiny. Peyton Manning,
sure,
for a large part of his career, was when are you going to win the big one? Heck, even when he came here to Denver, having already won one Super Bowl, and the Broncos signed him as a free agent, immediately one of the talking points was, well, have you looked at his playoff record? It's not that great.
Right.
So this is somebody who had to deal with that kind of scrutiny.
You look at his playoff record in general, like he's a couple games over 500 maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a great record.
John Elway had to answer a lot of those same criticisms. Jim Kelly lost 4 straight Super Bowls. He has to deal with that. Trust me, we're already starting to hear it with Josh Allen. When is Josh Allen going to step up and win the big one? So I'd like to take the racial component out of that. I don't think it applies here.
Well, that was another thing that, and I'm not speaking out of turn, but that was another thing. Like, when you talk to Lamar, I've sat with Lamar in several meetings. Lamar he's unbelievable. He's a great kid. He's a freaking there are very few guys that can line up against NFL players and make them look like JV athletes to a varsity athlete. Like, he's one of the few people I've ever watched do that. He is phenomenal. And he has certainly gotten better and better and better as a pocket guy. But not only sitting with Lamar, when I sit with Lamar to do a Baltimore game, I also sit with the defensive coordinator of the other team and the defensive players of the other team. And there is not one coordinator I have sat with, there is not one person in the NFL that I have talked to that hasn't said the same thing in regards to defending Lamar and the Baltimore Ravens. You've got to make the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, beat you from the pocket. And, now, listen, man, at some point, if some point in the NFL, and this has just been true since the dawn of time, and you know what, we can buck that trend when we come to it, but at some point, your quarterback has to beat another team from the pocket. And every game will boil down to that at some point.
And I hate to break this news to Raven fans, or as you say, Lamar Jackson fans, but ultimately you are defined by winning a championship. You just are. And it's not just Lamar. There are plenty of other quarterbacks that are going to be facing that same kind of scrutiny.
Well,
again, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott.
Well, let me ask you this. Like, we've said this a bazillion times, not only on our radio show, but we've had this conversation. Aaron Rodgers is a 4-time MVP. Won Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Won.
The dynasty that never was.
Right. We called the Green Bay Packers the dynasty that never was. If you invite the greatest quarterbacks of all time to dinner, and there's, it's like Thanksgiving, and there's one main table and then the kids' table on the side, Aaron Rodgers is sitting at the kids' table.
Yeah.
Because he's got one championship.
Yes.
You don't get to sit with Joe Montana and Tom Brady and multiple Super Bowl winners at the big boy table. I'm sorry. That's how, until you find, and I don't know what the criteria would be, but until you find a better criteria for judging guys, at some point, if we're going to, it reminds me of this line of North Dallas 40. This is what I was getting. So all I did was landscape all week. I was 8 hours in my yard every day. I was pulling weeds and redoing some rock gardens and just all kinds of stuff, right? And I was loving it. And I would take a break and stop for, 6, 7, 10 minutes, and I'd read 3 or 4 idiots, on Twitter. And so I would respond to the 3 or 4 idiots. And
He's talking to you.
Yeah, and then I put my phone away, and I'd go back to work, and I come back and read some more stupid comments from the cult, and then and I would answer a couple more and things of that nature. But there's this line in the movie North Dallas 40, and it's a classic movie if you've never watched it. And it was the player, I think it was Nick Nolte, that said the line about the organization that said, when I call it a game, you call it a business. And when I call it a business, you call it a game. And for Lamar, when I say it's about the quarterback, you say it's about the team. When I say it's about the team, you say it's about Lamar. And you can't have it both ways. And ultimately, we pay the quarterback the big money. John Elway told me this when I was playing with John Elway here in Denver. He was like, hey, man, your guys' job is first and second down. That ain't my job. That's your job. My job is to convert on third down. And you're going to get the lion's share of the scrutiny. You'll get the lion's share of the praise when you win. But you're going to get the lion's share of the scrutiny when you lose. And, I don't think I guarantee you this. I've sat with Lamar enough to know that there's nobody that gets more disappointed about the Ravens not playing well and him not being able to lead them to a Super Bowl than Lamar. I mean, he's a great young man, and he's a great player.
So I know you got a lot of pushback to the idea that you believe quarterbacks, their responsibility is to develop wide receivers. You got a lot of pushback on that.
Yeah.
Explain that. What specifically do quarterbacks have to do to develop receivers versus it being the other way around, where receivers are there to make the quarterback?
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you every year hear about the quarterback camps that quarterbacks put together and bring all their receivers out to wherever, and they run routes, and they is that part of the responsibility of the quarterback to put those together? Are they doing it just because they want to hang out? Or are they doing it to essentially grow and develop how they want to play?
But how? How are they developing? What are they working on? What are they accomplishing?
Hey man, on this particular route, I would like you at this depth or at this. So I'll give you a couple of examples, okay? We work here with Brandon Stokely at our radio station.
Yeah.
Brandon Stokely, former Raven, was drafted by the Ravens, won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. Then he was, Peyton Manning's lap boy in Indy for a long time, still is to this day. He washes Peyton's cars, does all those things. Anything Peyton calls, Brandon Stokely is there for Peyton. Yeah. Now, Brandon is a great guy and is an unbelievable player, played 14 years in the league. But, he's Peyton's kind of guy, like comfort. Brandon tells us stories about getting shut out in practice because he lined up wrong or ran the wrong route and never saw another ball during the course of practice. Like, he'll freeze you out. So when Peyton got signed in Denver, his first year is 2012, and I'm buddies with John Fox, who's the head coach at the time. He's working with the Detroit Lions right now as a defensive consultant, and so they're doing a blitz pickup drill. And they do it every day. And I'm standing on the sideline watching it with John Fox and every other coach. And there's not one coach on the field. Peyton is in complete control of the blitz pickup drill. And so Foxy elbows me and says, we're the least blitz team in the NFL, but Peyton demands that we do this drill every day. So we just gave it to him. He's got 10 minutes. Do your thing, right? And Peyton is that Peyton is not the most gifted athlete. He is the antithesis of Lamar Jackson, right? And he's out there dog cussing receivers. This is how I want this route run. And he lines up, he walks out to where the receivers in a condensed split, right? In a tight split. He's like, I want it, and then stick head, and he's like, this is exactly how I want it. And then he's yelling at guys like, you don't break that off at 12, you break it off at 11. We're in the potential, I need this route adjusted to this. And I mean, he is just with dogged determination coaching all these guys to exactly what he wants. Let me ask you this. Is that development of receivers? Yeah. Is that helping them understand the game through your eyes? So I go to Tampa to call a game Brady's first year. He's out there on the practice field with the receivers and stuff. So I end up talking to Mike Evans afterwards. And
not me.
Not you, Mike Evans.
The least famous Mike Evans. The other
fake
one.
Mike Evans, yes. So I end up talking to Mike Evans, who, is at this point, that was whatever year it was like 2020 or whatever it was, right? Well, Mike Evans is 4 or 5 Pro Bowls at that time. And he was just like, man, I thought we did things right. I thought we were intense. I thought we practiced hard. I thought we were prepared. He goes, then Brady walks in. I'm like, I got to ratchet my stuff up to the next level. Everybody had to ratchet it up to the next level. And Brady said, he told me something really interesting. He goes, and this goes back to New England. Was Wes Welker developed when Miami cut him, and then New England picked him up, and all of a sudden Wes Welker's a Pro Bowl, borderline Hall of Fame wide receiver?
Julian Edelman, a former college quarterback
at Kent State. Yeah. Was he developed? So Brady told me this about Tampa. He goes, I was so used in New England to as soon as we get done with an offensive period and they'd switch to defense, I'd have all my receivers running routes and going over what we either went over or what we're going to go over to make sure that the routes were right, that I liked, the look of it, that I'm coaching those guys up between, while the defense is taking reps, because it was cool enough in New England to do that. He goes, in Tampa Bay, one of the big adjustments for me is my guys are gassed because it's 96 degrees with humidity. And so he goes, we couldn't get the extra work that's required to develop the receivers to make sure that we have rapport. So is that not the development of wide receivers and making sure that you're seeing the game through my eyes? And he goes, until it cooled down a little bit, we couldn't do the extra work.
I guess I'm kind of confused here, and I guess it applies to some Lamar Jackson fans, but also fans of other quarterbacks around the league. Why are so many fans afraid to put that responsibility on the quarterback? And why all of a sudden is there a rush to try to say, well, yeah, but, there's 11 guys out there and all this? Why is it that this is a league that over and over and over tells us how much they're willing to risk and gamble and overdraft quarterbacks because of how important they think the position is? And then if you're lucky enough to find one of those guys, you pay him huge amounts of money.
Right.
For what exactly? If what I'm hearing from some of these Lamar Jackson fans is that, well, it's not Lamar's responsibility, it's up to the receivers as well, then what exactly are we paying and overdrafting these quarterbacks for? Why are they so important if all of a sudden you want to stop and diminish their responsibility and say, well, they're only going to be as good as the receivers they're throwing to?
Yeah, which I think that's bullshit. I don't buy that.
Well, no, and the NFL agrees with you. But why do so many fans struggle to see that?
I don't, it's Lamar's different because when Lamar got drafted, there were a lot of people, a lot of NFL experts, including Commander-in-Chief, Bill Polian, who basically thought he should move to wide receiver. And so there is that element. And I understand that element, that what people perceived as a racial element, because he was so gifted athletically that he wasn't getting a fair shake. Now, I will also tell you that I did the first game in Baltimore in a rainstorm. I did the first game where Flacco came back from his injury. So in 2018, Flacco was a starting quarterback, got injured. Lamar took over. They completely changed the offense to enhance and help with whatever his skill set was, which was, running the ball and moving around and doing all those things that he did. So I ended up, grabbing Joe Flacco and basically saying, hey, man, because at the time going into it, there was some criticism that Joe really wasn't helping Lamar the way he should be helping Lamar as kind of the understudy. And Joe just looked at me and said, what am I supposed to do? Like, I have no idea what we're running. I can't run anything. So it was the first game that Joe came back and was healthy, and they made him a healthy scratch. They didn't dress him. And so it's when he lost his starting quarterback position. Mm-hmm. He goes, but they've completely changed the offense. What do I know about zone reads? And what do I like? I don't know any. I can't run. I can't do any of that stuff. Right? So they created this offense, and one of the other pushbacks I get was, well, one of the best drafting organizations in the history of the NFL, in the Baltimore Ravens, can't draft receivers. So you're telling me that they can draft every other position and they can hit and they can have, an extremely gifted roster, but they just don't know how to draft receivers? Or they just don't know how to develop receivers. And then people are like, well, what they should do instead of going so deep into the draft, that from 96 to 19, from 96 till 2018, you know how many drafted receivers they drafted in the first round of the draft during that time?
Talking about a little over 20 years, right?
Yeah, 21 years or something like that.
Probably 4 or 5?
3.
Okay.
Do you know how many first round receivers they drafted since they drafted Lamar in 2018? 3. So it's not like they're not addressing it. Here's the other part that people are like, well, you can't just do it through the draft. You got to go get a big-time free agent. Well, here's what I know about NFL receivers that are big-time receivers. They're divas. They want to be the focal point of the offense. You know what you're not going to be as a free agent wide receiver in Baltimore? The focal point of the offense. Why? Because it's a run-first offense, and your quarterback runs the ball. So, I get a lot of pushback. Well, it's not because of Lamar. Well, no, it's not. Well, sure it is. Part of it is because that's the offense they've implemented. Has it grown? Absolutely, it's grown. But if you're a free agent, big-time, top-notch wide receiver, do you want to go to an offense that's going to run it 50% of the time or 55% of the time or whatever it is? When the average in the NFL is 65% throw and what's that math? 35% run? But then all of a sudden I'm going to go to an offense instead that's 50% run and 50% pass? No, you want to be the focal point. You want to be the reason. That's how receivers operate. So what are the odds of you signing a big-time free agent wide receiver in that offense? It's slim because they don't want to go there. And listen, man, that's not a knock on Lamar. It's not a knock on the organization. It is the reality of what receivers want. They want to be the focal point. They don't want to be like they don't. Hey, man, Hollywood Brown in 2021 had 91 catches for over 1,000 yards and asked to be traded. Why? I have no idea. And I'm sure he and Lamar are tighter than mouse nuts. I'm sure I'm sure they love each other. But there was something about that. He didn't want to be in that offense. So again, we'll see. Maybe Hollywood Brown, he went to Arizona, he didn't produce, right? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe he'll be, maybe in Kansas City now, maybe he'll be the focal point of that offense and get exactly what he wants. I have no idea. But there are so many things that, from just a football perspective, you're just trying to add perspective. And, I've just got, it's been amazing. It's been amazing to me how many people have zero perspective and just want to make it about like racial divide, which I don't understand that.
Well, I know we've been having this conversation. It's been centered around Lamar and your exchanges with Raven fans, Lamar fans.
Right.
But I would hope that people would take out of this conversation today is that this is a more global conversation about NFL quarterbacks and the things that all these quarterbacks, now we're using Lamar as an example, but this applies to a bunch of quarterbacks out there. Two big things I take away from it. One, you better win big.
Yeah.
If you want to go down and be remembered, you have to win a championship. That's just the way it is. Maybe that's unfair, and there are a lot of great athletes out there that never won a championship, and maybe they get slighted because of it, and that's not right. But the fact remains is that until you come up with a different measuring stick,
right, winning
a championship is ultimately what separates athletes. And the other thing too, Mark, is that, and I think you have made a very good illustration of what this is all about. The great quarterbacks are supposed to make receivers. They are. And that's what they're being drafted for, and that's what they're being paid for. And to try to diminish the importance and the responsibility of a quarterback just because it hasn't worked out yet, I think you're making excuses for the quarterback.
I think that, all those things are true. It's just such a nuanced conversation. Like, hey, listen, man, I think Justin Herbert, like he missed, I think, 4 games last year, but he has set in his first 4 years, like most attempts, most completions, most, yardage, like all this, that, and the other. The Chargers going to charge. At some point, Justin Herbert has got to be able to lead his team to a championship or lead his team into the playoffs, right? So, hey, listen, man, I know that from the pocket you have, presented yourself so far as one of the top pocket guys in the NFL. Dude, you got to win. And, it'll be interesting now with Jim Harbaugh there, and they got rid of their receivers. Like, it'll be interesting to see they got a bunch of second-year guys that nobody really has ever heard of, It'll be interesting to see exactly how they perform as a passing offense. And I know they're going to lean more into the run because that's what Jim does. But it'll be interesting to see, we'll get a read on, is Justin Herbert going to be able to help develop those receivers?
There you go. If Jim Harbaugh was sitting right here in this conversation, I think he'd echo what you say, that Justin Herbert, drafted high, is regarded as a bright young star in this league, has certainly been paid as such. Okay, go turn a bunch of second-year guys into stars.
Yeah,
I think that's how Jim Harbaugh feels about it.
When somebody asked Jim Harbaugh about offensive weapons, he said, "Well, my O-line." Like, that's the tip of the spear. Like I love it.
Oh, you love that. That's that's like porn for you.
Yeah, there's no question. I love Jim's approach to the game. I think it's the right approach. It's like why I snicker when I hear, "Oh, Caleb Williams is set for success." Never has there been more weapons surrounding a quarterback. Like when I hear people talk about, oh, the Bears are going to, potentially win the NFC North or at least contend for a playoff berth, I really am skeptical.
But when you have, but see, isn't it the opposite of when you're a team that doesn't yet have what you think is the answer at quarterback? Shouldn't you try to maybe overinvest in the receiver position to give that quarterback as much help as possible until they show that they're legit? And then once they've shown they're legit, okay, put more responsibility on them to go develop and work and do more with less.
Yeah.
But until they get there, isn't it a smart thing to do, like what they're doing in
I think
Chicago?
Like I think I understand the concept of, hey man, we'll surround you with all kinds of weapons, and then you'll be able to, mitigate potential mistakes because these guys will make up for those potential mistakes. I understand that concept. I don't necessarily believe in that concept, because the concept I believe in is let's physically go wear these guys out. Let's beat their ass down. Let's run the football. Let's do some things that, and that set up play action, because we'll get great opportunities where we get safeties nosing around, where we get one-on-one matchups that we will win, regardless of it's a first-round receiver or if it's a big-time free agent receiver or if it's, whoever that we draft in the second round that's going to eat a few people up. Like I just believe in building a team from the inside out. And if you build a team from the inside out, both defensively and offensively, you control line of scrimmage, you're going to win a lot of games in the National Football League. But I will tell you this. Let me just finish this with Lamar, because he is not only he's a great player, and he is must-watch television, man. He is phenomenal. But I guarantee you, Lamar fans, let me just address the cult.
Mark, this is not going to end well for you.
Let me just address.
I'm
just going to address the cult. There is nobody who will put more pressure on himself and responsibility on himself than Lamar himself. There is nobody that will that basically scrutinize his play more than Lamar will scrutinize his own play. So you're in good company. Now, bottom line though still is, ain't nobody under more pressure to perform in the playoffs than Lamar to perform in the playoffs, because he's completing 50% of his passes. He's getting looks that say, hey, throw the ball. So he's getting one-on-one opportunities. He's completing 57% of his passes. He's got 6 TDs and 6 interceptions, and he's 2-4 in playoff games. Takes the entire team to be great, right? It's not just a quarterback statistic. It isn't. To play and to win in the playoffs, everybody's got to do their part. Every guy, including the coaches, everybody's got to play well. But to point the finger at everybody else, just remember this, Colt. When you point the finger, right? There's what, 3 pointing back at you, and the saying in the NFL is, don't point the finger, pull the thumb. It's about you. It's your responsibility.
Sure, that cult comment will be well received this week.
They know who they are. They know who they are. Hey, for everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth podcast, we appreciate you guys. Boy, we had so many other things we were going to get to.
Yeah, we had a good conversation about quarterbacks. I liked it.
I do too. I like it as well. For everybody involved, thank you so much. Please push that subscribe button, and we'll be back with you later on this week.